I've been in three real programs. I've graduated from three real programs, and they've been mostly the same, sort of. But Penn State and Georgia are very much the university-style music program, which is highly academic. And then there's Boston Conservatory, which is obviously a performance-based thing, where academics were...
secondary. It's more applied.
Yes.
Definitely, it's so tricky, especially with the money thing, because I remember in undergrad talking to Carolyn Stewart, who is the violin professor at USF, University of South Florida, where I got my bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. And she said, everyone goes into debt. Don't worry about it. It just becomes one of your bills. No problem. And that's kind of how I proceeded going to Boston Conservatory, where we met, which is tremendously expensive. Yes. I think that, definitely having debt restricts your risk-taking, ability to, take some risks sometimes, because it's you have to make sure you pay that stuff off. It's a crazy bill.
If we were in biology, you would get an undergraduate degree in biology, and then a PhD would be incredibly specific to the point where your dissertation is talking about this one thing that's very specialized. Is that a good idea for music, or should it always just be a broad-based thing?
I've gotten incredibly mixed advice from this. To the point where I feel like the only answer that I've found is that it's different for everyone. There's a point of specialization or being known for one thing or whatever it is, that you just get bored because your area of interest isn't interesting enough for a long period of time, I guess. There is the biology example. There's the, having something you're known for, right? Or having something that you have specialized in and people remember you by, I guess.
I feel like you have to be an expert in something, and your education has to reflect that, but it's also a good idea to have the broad-based musical...
Right.
Yeah.
Do anything.
Do you think it's a good idea for schools to focus on nothing but the stuff that everybody plays, or is playing new music part of an education that is not only well-rounded, but necessary in a musical career today?
Yeah, that, in my experience, I was kind of lucky enough not to be raised exclusively on the war horses. And as a result, I'm a pretty firm believer that while they're excellent, well, first of all, excellent pieces of music and excellent educational tools, things you have to learn are in those pieces. Sure. You can learn those things in newer pieces. And so I kind of think it depends on why you're learning them. If you're learning them because you want to be someone who performs this piece a lot, then awesome. If you're learning them because I want to learn this piece, or I think I want to learn this technique, or I think I should learn this piece so I can check it off my list, I'm not sure that's the best reason, right, to choose it. Sure. Each time you learn a piece, you're making an investment, into your repertoire, into what you have to offer. It's you're building an element of your business, of your portfolio. Yeah. And you want to make sure you're spending your time and your resources in a good place, right? So if it's just because I should, for me, for example, the Dvorak Concerto, I like listening to it. I'll listen to it every once in a while, maybe. I've played in the orchestra once, and that was fun. But I don't want to perform it live. I don't want to, it's not something I want to be, going out there being I offer the Dvorak Concerto. Just because I don't feel like I have anything particularly interesting to bring to the piece or fresh, personally. Maybe someday I will, but not right now. And I don't really want to play it.
I feel the same way. And I was raised on the war horses. Before I got to college, it was Bach, Beethoven, not even Beethoven, Bach and Brahms. And then when I got to college, I learned standard stuff, Elgar Concerto, Sanson Concerto, regular Beethoven sonatas, things like that. And then, all of a sudden, my wonderful teacher at Penn State, who I very much enjoy, Kim Cook, gave me the Hindemann Sonata, which is not by any stretch of any imagination new music. But it was this thing that it seemed to be missing in my education to that point. And then I went to the Boston Conservatory, where Rhonda made me play new music. I remember one time in my first year, she said, if you want to play new music, you have to be able to do blah. I can't remember what she said, but I remember, if you want to play new music. And at that point in my life, it was like, I don't. Why are you saying this to me? And I think the people who are who are playing nothing but Bach suites, and when the newest thing in their repertoire is Shostakovich Sonata or something, they're missing a lot. And I think that new music, it's not just an addition to your repertoire, not just an addition to your technique, but it helps you to learn music in a way that Beethoven does.
Yeah, I don't know if this has been the experience for you, but when I learned, having learned a new music score, when I go back to the older pieces, I see things in the score that I'm like, how did I not notice that before? Things that have always been there, clear in the ink, like there's no mystery, but somehow you just didn't notice them, because there's something about looking at a new music score and the information you have to take in that makes you more sensitive to information.
Yes, that's exactly what my experience has been. I mean, and it's both. So at one point when I wanted to play Parasonatina Alda Decaphonia, at one point when I wanted to and never did, it was, okay, so I have to learn the notes, and then separately I have to learn the rhythm, and then separately I have to learn the choreography of how to get to the notes, and then separately I have to learn the choreography of how to get to the rhythm and the tapping and the bow and the thing and the here to the hair. Mm-hmm. It's just a completely different thing that you don't have to learn when you play Bach, but you should. Learning how to separate everything out into an individual thing is something that I think isn't taught and can't be taught when all you're playing is Rachmaninoff.
Well, it's something that I know I didn't feel until I'd gotten out of older music, was the reality of how much I was learning it by ear and not by score, by oral tradition, by recordings, by how my teacher played it, by how I felt it should go in my head. And there is nothing wrong with that. No. But it's not always the most interesting solution. As I step away from my teachers and from my own educational processes, I found definitely for me that listening to recordings has inhibited my ability to find interesting interpretations.
I agree with that. And I've had a teacher who's constantly said things like, traditionally that's not how it's done. Or if you listen to this recording, they don't do this. Or, things like that. And I find in my own teaching, I don't encourage students to listen. I have one student who takes the biggest rallentandos ever at the end of the Allemande from the third Bach suite. And if I were a person who was sort of religious about my listening and things, I would hate that. But I kind of love it.
I think there's an element of finding the way to play it that's very genuine to your voice and your interpretation versus kind of through osmosis, mimicking other people's interpretations. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always more convincing to hear someone who's arrived at their own interpretation through whatever means, but it's their own, and you can tell that it's their own, versus one that's doing it the right way according to a ton of recordings. Sure.